On my first day at work, I met my boss. The problem? She was my first love, and the woman who rejected me years ago. The woman who taught me what longing felt like, before I was old enough to survive it, was standing at the front of the boardroom with a clicker in one hand and a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kang Ji-won, Executive Director of Brand Strategy. Welcome to Halcyon Creative. My lungs forgot how to work. For one impossible, violent second, the world split cleanly in two. In one version, I was 24, newly hired, dressed in a cream blouse I'd ironed 3 times because first impressions mattered, sitting among 10 other recruits in a sleek Seoul office with floor-to-ceiling windows and the Han River glinting in the distance. In the other, I was 17 again, standing under the half-dead ginkgo tree behind the music building, with a confession letter in my hand and my whole heart stupidly open. Kang Ji-won, my first love, my first humiliation. The woman who had taken my trembling letter, read every line, and told me no in the gentlest voice I had ever heard. No, but only because she wasn't ready. No, but only because I deserved someone who could choose me without fear. No, but said so beautifully that I spent years hating myself for still hearing comfort in rejection. And now she was here, all sharp edges and expensive restraint, introducing herself as if she had never once held my heart in both hands and given it back before I knew how to stitch it closed. She looked older, obviously, more refined, more dangerous. Her hair, once always loose around her shoulders when she volunteered at our school arts mentorship program, was now pinned into a low, immaculate knot. Her charcoal suit fit like it had been built around her. Her white blouse was severe, almost clinical, but there was a familiar softness at her throat where the first button had been left undone. She scanned the room once. When her gaze landed on me, she stopped. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to catch it, just the smallest hitch. A breath too shallow. A pause so brief it vanished the moment it happened. But I knew her. Or at least I knew the version of her that had once existed in stolen afternoons, hidden smiles, and 1,000 moments I had replayed until memory became religion. She knew me too. The clicker tightened in her hand. At Halcyon, she continued, voice smooth and even, we expect precision, discretion, and initiative. Talent gets you noticed. Consistency gets you trusted. Someone beside me started typing notes. A guy near the far end of the table nodded like she was revealing scripture. Across from me, a girl with a glossy black bob straightened in her seat, clearly trying to appear impressive. I sat frozen, pulse slamming hard enough to make my fingertips tingle. I had moved cities for this job. I had wanted a clean start. I had wanted a version of adulthood that belonged entirely to me. Something built out of work and discipline and rent paid on time. I had wanted to prove that my life could become larger than one teenage heartbreak. Instead, my heartbreak was standing 10 feet away in designer heels telling me about company culture. She moved through the presentation with terrifying composure. Department structures, reporting lines, client confidentiality, campaign review process. She was exactly what everyone wants in a leader and fears in a superior. Precise, self-contained, and impossible to read. Except, not impossible for me. I saw the ways she was avoiding me. She didn't look in my direction again. She shifted so the conference table remained between us. When she walked around the room, She curved wide around my chair, giving me a clean berth that felt more intimate than proximity. By the time orientation ended, my throat felt lined with metal. Chairs scraped back, recruits rose in clumsy clusters, collecting notepads and coffee cups, already whispering introductions to one another. I stayed seated a second too long because standing required coordination, and my body seemed to be operating on a delay. "Ms. Yoon," Jiwon said. The room kept moving. No one noticed the way my spine snapped straight. "Stay for a moment." A few people glanced over, curious but not suspicious. I forced myself to gather my notebook slowly, as if nothing under my skin had gone feral. The last recruit slipped out. The door clicked shut. Silence fell like a blade. Jiwon set the clicker down on the table with controlled care. The city shone behind her in pale morning light. From this close, I could see the fine strain around her eyes, the tension held carefully in her jaw. "Close the door," she said. I almost laughed. It would have sounded unstable, so I didn't. I turned the lock instead. When I faced her again, she hadn't moved. "You weren't on the final staffing sheet I reviewed," she said. Of all the things she could have said, that one made anger flare through the shock. "Good morning to you too." Her expression didn't change, but something sharpened at the edges. "I'm serious." "So am I." We stared at each other across the polished table. 4 years collapsed between us, and somehow changed nothing. She still had that unbearable stillness, that way of seeming calm only because she held every visible emotion under ruthless control. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said at last. "Congratulations," I said. "Neither did I." A small silence, then, carefully, "This changes nothing about your position." I folded my arms. "What exactly do you think I'm asking for?" Her gaze flicked to my face, then away. That alone felt like an admission. "I'm saying there need to be boundaries, immediate ones. You will report to Team Lead Park, not to me directly. Any strategic reviews involving your work will include at least one additional manager. No personal communication outside official channels." The cold professionalism of it should have soothed me. It should have made this easier. Instead, it felt like being erased in formal language. "Right," I said softly. "Boundaries. Because heaven forbid your old mistakes make things awkward." Her eyes came back to mine then, dark, sharp, tired in a way that made me hate my own ability to notice. So Ari. I hadn't heard her say my name in 4 years. It was almost enough to break me. Almost. "Don't," I said. Something moved through her expression too fast to catch. Pain, maybe, or frustration, or memory. "I'm trying to handle this correctly." "You mean cleanly?" "Professionally." "No," I said. "Cleanly. So nothing messy from the past gets on your nice office carpet." She inhaled once, slow and controlled. "That's not fair." I laughed, and this time it sounded exactly as bitter as I meant it to. "You don't get to talk to me about fair." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, very quietly, "You should go meet your team." Which was such a Jiwon thing to do. Bleed a little, then close the wound before anyone could see it. I reached for the door, then stopped with my hand on the lock. Without looking back, I asked, "Did you recognize me right away?" Silence. When she finally answered, her voice had gone lower. "Immediately." I left before she could see how much that mattered. By lunch, Half the office had already decided Kang Ji-won was terrifying. Not mean terrifying, whispered Min-suk from account ops, leaning across the cafeteria table like he was sharing classified information. Refined terrifying. Like she'd destroy your entire career and still remind you to drink water. The woman with the glossy bob snorted into her iced coffee. That's exactly right. She's beautiful, someone else added reverently. I stabbed at my rice with unnecessary force. I hadn't noticed. That earned me a suspicious look from Hejin, the glossy bob girl, as it turned out. She had quick eyes, expensive lip tint, and the kind of confidence that came naturally to women who had never had to fake it. You're new and already lying this early in the day? I forced a shrug. I'm more focused on the fact that I need this job. Same, Min-suk said mournfully. Beauty becomes less emotionally relevant when rent is due. That got a laugh out of the table. Mine came half a beat late. I had been assigned to Brand Strategy Division 3, one floor below Ji-won's office. My direct supervisor was team lead Park Sun-hee, efficient and warm in a no-nonsense way that instantly made me want to impress her. The rest of the team seemed decent. Min-suk from Ops, Haejin from Design Coordination, 2 copy associates, a research analyst, and me. In theory, it was perfect. In practice, Kang Ji-won's name sat at the top of our reporting structure like a loaded weapon. At 2:13 p.m., an email hit my inbox. Subject, Campaign Placement Update, from Kang Ji-won. My stomach dropped so hard, I thought I might actually feel it land. The message was brief. You have been moved onto the Vela account with Division 1 support. Timeline begins immediately. Presentation prep starts tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Conference room D. That was all. No greeting, no explanation, no sign-off. Just a reassignment onto Halcyon's most visible luxury beauty account, the exact kind of campaign junior staff usually begged for and rarely touched in their first quarter. Min-suk leaned over my shoulder before I could stop him. You got Vela? On day 1? Haejin spun around from the next desk cluster. No way! Sun-hee appeared a second later, reading the email over my shoulder with a frown that wasn't quite displeased. Well, that's unexpected. Is that bad? I asked. It's intense, she said. It means Ji-won wants stronger data support after last quarter's client pushback. It also means you'll be in a lot of meetings fast. A lot of meetings. With her. I swallowed. Great. Sun-hee gave me a long look, perhaps hearing how unconvincing that sounded. Do good work and keep your head clear.
Vela eats people who panic. I smiled thinly. I'm very calm. Min-suk coughed. Hyejin outright laughed. Inside, my heartbeat was a riot. That evening, I got home, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor beside my couch, because I didn't have the strength to make it all the way onto the furniture. My roommate, Jisoo, took one look at me from the kitchen and lowered her chopsticks. What happened? I met my boss. And? I looked at her. She blinked once, twice, then her eyes widened. No. Yes. No. Jisoo, your boss is the woman from high school? The one from the mentorship program? The one you wrote poetry about for 6 months and then pretended not to be dying when she rejected you? Wow, I said. Really nice summary. Very compassionate. She abandoned her dinner immediately and crossed the room,
sitting on the coffee table in front of me. "You're joking. You have to be joking." "I wish I were." "What did she say?" I laughed once, brittle and exhausted. She said, boundaries, official channels, professionalism. Basically drew a neat little line around our history and called it policy. Jisoo's mouth flattened. "I don't like her already." "You used to like her." "I used to like the tragic, older, kind-eyed version from your teenage memories. This one sounds like corporate emotional warfare in heels." I scrubbed a hand over my face. "She moved me onto her biggest account." "That's suspicious." "It's work-related. Probably. Maybe. I don't know." "Do you want my honest opinion?" "No," I said immediately. "She's either trying to keep you close or trying to control the situation before you do." I looked away. Jisoo sighed and softened. "Ari." "I know." "Do you?" "No, actually, I didn't. I knew only that 4 years had failed to cauterize what she'd done to me, and that realizing it felt humiliating. I slept badly, dreamed worse. In one dream, I was back behind the music building, handing her my confession letter. In another, I was in the boardroom again, while she introduced herself to strangers like I was one of them. By morning, I hated myself for still caring how her voice sounded when she said my name. Conference Room D was all glass walls, chrome trim, and bad acoustics. At 8:29, the Vela team was already seated. Sun-hee, Hyejin, a senior copy strategist named Daeun, 2 client services leads, me. At 8:30 exactly, Jiwon walked in. No wasted motion, no visible rush, just complete command of the room from the second the door shut behind her. "Let's begin." Slides came up, product timeline, audience fatigue indicators, quarterly repositioning opportunities. She ran the room like she'd built time herself. And for the first 15 minutes, I almost convinced myself I could do this. Then she said, "So Ari, your pre-read suggested lower emotional resonance among Vela's 19 to 24 segment. Walk us through that." Every face turned toward me. I sat up straighter. "The issue isn't product appeal, it's tone saturation. Vela has been selling aspiration in a market where younger consumers increasingly distrust polished perfection. The campaign language is elegant, but it's emotionally closed. It performs better as identity projection than desire." Daeun nodded slowly. Sun-hee looked interested. Jiwon's face gave me nothing. "And your evidence?" I clicked to my slide. Cross-category response comparisons, comment clustering, sentiment analysis, and retention decay after the second asset cycle. Their existing audience admires the brand. The younger segment doesn't feel invited into it. "Admiration still converts in luxury," said one of the client services leads. "Sometimes," I said, "but only when desire feels reachable enough to be played with. Right now, their messaging feels like a museum display. People don't imagine themselves inside it. They stand outside and compliment the lighting." Minuscule shift at Jiwon's mouth. Not a smile. Worse, approval. It hit me with humiliating force. She leaned back slightly. "So, your recommendation is what?" "Reduce distance without sacrificing prestige. Less unattainable perfection, more intimate authority. Give consumers someone they want to become close to, not just become." Silence. The room considered it. Then Jiwon asked, coolly, "Do you always make bold strategic suggestions on your second day?" Heat rose under my collar. There was no obvious insult in the question. That was the problem. With anyone else, it would have sounded challenging, maybe even impressed. From her, it landed too close to personal. Only when the data supports them, I said. Hyejin coughed into her hand to hide a grin. Sunhee looked at me like I had either earned her respect or shortened my life. Jiwon held my gaze for half a second too long. Good, she said. Then bring sharper support by tomorrow. If we argue for tonal repositioning, we do it decisively. The meeting moved on. My pulse never recovered. When it ended, everyone rose in murmuring clusters. Daeun asked me for my research sources. Sunhee told me to send the segmentation notes by noon. Hyejin squeezed my shoulder on her way out and whispered, "That was hot. Slightly terrifying, but hot." "Please don't narrate my professional suffering," I muttered. One by one, they disappeared. I was shoving my laptop into my bag when I realized Jiwon was still in the room. Of course she was. She stood near the screen controls, not looking at me. I should have left. Instead, I said, "Was that necessary?" Her gaze lifted. Was what necessary? The performance? One brow tilted. You'll need to be more specific. I laughed under my breath. Of course. She moved a step closer, heels soundless on the carpet. I challenged your reasoning in a strategy meeting. That's called my job. You challenge other people like collaborators. You challenge me like you're trying to see whether I flinch. For the first time since orientation, something cracked across her expression. Small, but real. And did you? I stared at her. It was such an outrageous question that, for a second, my mind went blank. Then anger surged in to fill the space. You don't get to ask me that. Jiwon's jaw flexed once. No, I don't. The answer was so immediate, so stripped of defense, that it disarmed me for one disastrous beat. She looked tired suddenly. Not physically, somewhere deeper. Bring the revised support by noon, she said, voice flat again. Then she stepped aside, opening a path to the door. Dismissed. I hated her for how obediently my body remembered leaving first. 3 days into the Vela account, I developed an entirely new relationship with caffeine and self-restraint. I worked through lunch, stayed late, built datasets tight enough to survive cross-examination. If Jiwon was going to put me under a microscope, I would become too competent to break. The rest of the team noticed. You know you're allowed to blink, Hyejin said on Thursday evening, dropping a tangerine onto my keyboard. That's a thing humans do. I rubbed my eyes. I'm finishing the social perception deck. You've been finishing that deck for 3 hours. That's because it keeps needing to be more correct. She perched on the edge of my desk. You always like this under pressure? Worse, actually. I'm doing great. Hyejin studied me for a second with a sharpness I hadn't expected from someone so outwardly easygoing. Can I ask something inappropriate? I'd prefer if you didn't. Do you and Director Kong have weird history? My fingers slipped on the trackpad. I went still. Hyejin winced. Okay, wow, that's a yes. Sorry. It's just, she's different with you. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Different how? Like she's either trying very hard not to look at you, or trying very hard not to throw everyone else out of the room when she does. She lifted one shoulder. It's intense. That is deeply unhelpful information. I'm a designer. Observing visual tension is part of my gifts. I opened my mouth to deny everything, but a voice cut in from behind us. Hejin. We both turned. Jiwon stood near the aisle, tablet tucked under one arm. Just one word. Just Hejin's name. Yet the entire air changed. Hejin hopped off my desk so fast it was almost comic. I was just leaving. The mock-up revisions? In your inbox in 10 minutes. 5. Yes, director. She shot me a look that was half apology, half fascination, then vanished. Jiwon's attention settled on me. Not warm, not cold, worse than either. Controlled. Stay a moment when you're done, she said. Then she walked away. My entire body reacted like I had been called into a principal's office and a confession booth at the same time. I stared at my screen for a full minute without seeing a single word. At 7:12, after pretending to work long enough that no one could accuse me of sprinting toward emotional disaster, I knocked on the open frame of Jiwon's office. Her office was large without being ostentatious. Glass on one side, built-in shelving on the other. Everything arranged with a kind of restrained taste I would have recognized anywhere. No clutter, no softness except a ceramic cup with 2 fountain pens and a single black and white photograph turned face down in a frame. She didn't invite me to sit. I stayed standing. The revised Vela deck is good, she said, eyes on her screen. You tightened the logic. Thank you. You need to stop over-explaining when challenged. Your first instinct is right more often than your second. That startled me enough that I forgot my anger for a second. Was that a compliment? A pause, then she looked up. Don't sound so shocked. You've made it hard to calibrate. Something almost like regret moved through her expression, gone too quickly to trust. She closed the laptop in front of her and finally leaned back. I want to clarify the reassignment. I said nothing. You were moved on to Vela because your application work stood out. The consumer empathy in your pitch deck was better than what some senior strategists produce. It wasn't arbitrary. The words should have pleased me. Instead, suspicion rose first. And it had nothing to do with the fact that you know me? Jiwon's gaze held steady. It had everything to do with the fact that I know how capable you are when you stop apologizing for having instincts. My heart made a sick, traitorous movement. That isn't an answer. It's the most honest one I can give. The office felt suddenly smaller. I folded my arms tighter. You don't get to talk like you know me. That landed. I saw it in the way her mouth stilled. You're right, she said. I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Then why does it feel, I asked quietly, like you're the one who keeps stepping on old land? For the first time, Jiwon looked away from me first, toward the window, toward the dark city outside, anywhere else. When she spoke, her voice had gone quieter than I'd ever heard it in the office. Because I've been trying not to. I should have left. I really should have. But the thing about old wounds is that once they open, your body mistakes pain for truth. You were good at that even then, I said. Her gaze returned to mine, cautious now, almost braced. At what? Acting like restraint was kindness. The silence that followed felt bottomless. Then, slowly, Jiwon stood.
She came around the desk but stopped well short of me, leaving a careful, maddening distance between us. "What happened then," she said, each word measured, "was not kindness." I stared at her. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from her.
It was nowhere near enough. "No," I said. "It wasn't." Her throat moved as she swallowed. The room held itself around us. Then she stepped back first, as if remembering the shape of propriety like it physically hurt. "Go home, Ari." My name again. Not Ms. Yoon, not So Ari. Just Ari, in the voice she used only when something inside her was close to splitting open. I left with shaking hands. Jisoo was waiting up when I got home, painting her nails a violent cherry red at the kitchen table. "You have the face," she said immediately. "What face?" "The one where your life is one emotionally loaded sentence away from becoming unmanageable." I dropped my bag onto a chair. "That is an absurdly specific diagnosis. And yet accurate. Sit." I sat. She capped the nail polish and leaned forward. "Report." So I did. Not all of it. I didn't know how to explain the office air, the way Jiwon's restraint had become its own kind of touch, the fact that hearing my name in her mouth still felt like a match struck too close to my skin. But I gave Jisoo enough. Enough for her to stare at me in growing alarm. "Nope," she said finally. "I hate this." "Which part?" "The part where she keeps oscillating between professional distance and personal subtext, like she's trying to kill you artistically." I put my head on the table. "That's not helpful." "She hurt you once already." "I know." "And now she has power over your paycheck." "I know." "And you still look at the wall every time you say her name, like you're trying not to romanticize drywall because it reminds you of her office." I raised my head slowly. That was one time. Jisoo folded her arms. "You're not over her." I opened my mouth, closed it. She made a soft, pained sound. "Oh, honey." "I don't need pity." "That wasn't pity. That was the sound of me realizing this is going to get catastrophic before it gets better." I leaned back in the chair and covered my face. Nothing is happening. "Your voice just went up half an octave. Something is absolutely happening." "She's my boss," Jisoo sighed. "That has never stopped lesbians in fiction. Unfortunately, you are now behaving like a fictional woman." I laughed in spite of myself. Then, because the laughter faded too quickly, I said what I hadn't wanted to say out loud. She looked sorry. Jisoo's expression changed, not softer, sharper. "Sorry is easy," she said quietly. "Choosing you would have been hard. Don't confuse the two just because she wears remorse beautifully. That should have gone in one ear and lodged somewhere useful. Instead, I lay awake hearing Jiwon say, 'What happened then was not kindness.' As if she had been carrying the memory differently all this time too. The first crack in my composure came a week later. Vela's interim review had gone long, the client had been difficult, and one of the revised concepts had come back with contradictory notes from two different stakeholders. By 6 p.m., half the team looked ready to walk into traffic. I was in the print room, wrestling with a jammed stack of boards, when the door opened behind me. I didn't turn. If this printer ruins one more layout, I'm setting the entire building on fire. Silence. Then, that would create a paperwork burden. I closed my eyes. Of course it was her. I turned slowly. Jiwon stood just inside the door, one hand still on the frame. There was something almost unbearably normal about her standing in a cramped print room at dusk, city light diffused across the glass panel behind her. "You should knock before entering the scene of a future crime," I said. And to my horror, she laughed. Not politely, not performatively, actually laughed. Soft, low, brief, but real. The sound hit me with enough force to make me forget the printer entirely. We both froze. She recovered first, of course. She always did. Sunhee asked me to pick up the revised boards. I gestured at the machine like it had personally betrayed me. "They're being held hostage." Jiwon stepped closer. "Move." "Excuse me?" "You're glaring at it emotionally. It isn't helping." I stared as she rolled up one sleeve, bent slightly, and opened the side panel with the calm efficiency of someone who had apparently fought this exact machine before. "You know how to fix it?" "I know how to read instructions." "Show off." The word slipped out before I could stop it. Her hands paused on the inner latch. The air changed instantly, because that was an old word. One I used to use with her when she'd play Debussy from memory on the Art Center piano and pretend not to notice me staring. I saw her remember it. Saw it in the stillness that took her body all at once. Then she resumed, jaw set a little too tightly. 30 seconds later, the machine coughed, whirred, and started feeding boards properly. I stared at it. Traitor. "You're welcome." I looked at her. "You don't have to sound smug." "I don't have to sound anything. Yet here we are." That should not have been flirtation. It absolutely was. My heartbeat stumbled. Jiwon seemed to realize it too, because she straightened abruptly and took a step back, putting coolness back into her posture like armor. "Bring the finished set to conference room B when they're done." She turned for the door. I should have let her go. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Why do you act like nothing happened and then say things like that?" Her back went rigid. She didn't face me. "Because if I stop acting like nothing happened, I won't know how to stop." Then she left. The print room hummed around me. The boards slid out one by one. I stood there with my pulse in my throat, understanding with awful clarity that whatever existed between us had not died. It had only gone underground. And underground things, left long enough, become dangerous. From that point on, I started noticing her everywhere. Not in a dramatic, universe conspires kind of way. In smaller, more intimate violences. The way she was always somehow the first to notice when I spoke in meetings. The way her eyes tracked my hands when I presented. The way her composure tightened visibly any time another woman leaned too easily into my space. Maybe I would have dismissed that last part if it happened only once. It did not. It happened first with Hyejin. We were reviewing campaign stills at my desk, shoulders nearly touching as she showed me alternative type placements. She smelled like citrus toner and expensive shampoo. "You hate this font," she said. "I don't hate it. I just think it wants too much attention." "Same. That's why it reminds me of Minsuk." I laughed. At that exact moment, Jiwon emerged from the corridor and stopped mid-step. Stopped. It was tiny, almost invisible. But then her gaze dropped to where Hyejin's hand rested on the edge of my chair. Something hard flashed across her face. Not irritation, not managerial disapproval. Possession. Raw and gone in a second. "Hyejin," she said. Hyejin looked up. "Director?" "Conference room. Now." The tone could have cut steel. Hyejin blinked, then stood so quickly she nearly clipped my desk with her knee. "Right, sure." As she hurried away, she mouthed, "What was that?" at me. I had no answer, only the awful electric understanding that Ji-won had looked jealous. That night, I told myself I was imagining things. The next day proved I wasn't. We had a late prep session for the Vela pitch. Half the office had gone home. The remaining lights had shifted to evening mode, softer and dimmer, making everything feel too intimate for work. I was alone in a small huddle room reviewing last-minute notes when Unche from Client Relations slipped in, carrying 2 canned coffees. "Peace offering," she said, setting one beside my laptop. "You looked like you were about to unionize against PowerPoint." I smiled despite myself. "You're a saint." "I know." Unche was charming in the easy way some people are. No effort visible, no angle obvious. We'd spoken only a few times, but she had a warm voice and a talent for making even stressful interactions feel playful. She leaned against the table, eyes dropping to my notes. "You're the Vela prodigy everyone's talking about." "That is deeply untrue." Humble too. Dangerous." I laughed. "Please stop giving me traits like I'm a horse being auctioned." "Too late. I already decided you have tragic heroine energy." Before I could answer, the glass door slid open. Ji-won stood there. No knock, no warning, just sudden presence. Unche straightened instantly. "Director Kong?" Ji-won's gaze flicked to the unopened coffee can beside me, then to Unche, then back to me. "The final deck," she said, ignoring Unche entirely, "is due in my inbox in 20 minutes. "I know," I said. "Then I suggest fewer social visits." The room went still. Unche's brows lifted. I felt heat surge into my face, not from embarrassment exactly, but from the unmistakable sharpness under Ji-won's words. Unche, to her credit, recovered first. "I was just leaving." Ji-won stepped aside without speaking. The door closed behind Unche. Now we were alone. And furious. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back into the wall. "What was that?" Ji-won didn't move. A reminder about timing? No, it was rude. Her jaw tightened. "This account is sensitive." "So am I, apparently." That hit. Her eyes flashed. "That isn't what I meant." "Then say what you meant." For a second, I really thought she would. I saw it, the impulse, violent and immediate, rising into her face before discipline crushed it flat. "Finish the deck," she said. I laughed in disbelief. "You don't get to do that." "Do what?" "Act like I'm the one making this strange." She stepped into the room and shut the door behind her. Not loudly, carefully. Which was somehow worse. The sound of the latch settling clicked straight through me. "You think I don't know this is strange?" she asked quietly. The softness in her voice was more dangerous than any anger. I held my ground. Barely. "Then stop punishing every woman who talks to me." For the first time in weeks, Ji-won's composure fractured fully. Not loudly. She didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She just looked at me with something so undisguised in her eyes that my own breath caught. "Do you want me to lie?" she asked. Everything inside me went still. "About what?" She came one step closer, close enough that I could see her pulse at the base of her throat. "About the fact that every time someone touches your desk or leans too close, or makes you laugh when I can hear it from down the hall, I spend the next 10 minutes remembering that I have no right to care. My mouth went dry. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air system overhead. I had imagined versions of this, 100 of them. None of them prepared me for hearing it. Ji-won. She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them again, the damage was already done. Finish the deck, she said, voice wrecked into flatness. We'll discuss boundaries tomorrow. Then she walked out, leaving me alone with the coffee, the deck, and a heart pounding hard enough to blur the edges of the room. I didn't sleep. At all. By the time the Vela presentation started the next morning, I had consumed enough caffeine to qualify as medically irresponsible. Somehow, the pitch went flawlessly. The client loved the revised emotional positioning. The younger audience adaptation tested well. Even the notoriously impossible vice president on their side nodded approvingly at my segmentation slide. When it was over, the conference room relaxed all at once into relieved chatter. Sunhee squeezed my wrist under the table. Hijin kicked my shoe lightly in celebration. Minsuk mouthed legend from across the room. Ji-won remained composed through all of it, thanking the client, summarizing next steps, shaking hands. Only when the room began to empty did she look at me. Once. Directly. No words. Just that look. Pride, hunger, caution, history. It burned clean through me. Afterwards, Sunhee sent the team home early. I should have left. Instead, at 5:47 p.m., a calendar notification appeared. Meeting request. Debrief. From Kang Ji-won. Location, Executive Office. No one else invited. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then accepted. Jisoo would later tell me this was the exact moment I abandoned common sense and stepped voluntarily into a dramatic act break. She wasn't wrong. Ji-won's office looked different in evening light. Softer at the edges, more private, more dangerous. When I stepped inside, the door was already ajar. She stood by the window with her blazer folded over one arm, white blouse sleeves rolled back, hair loosened from its perfect knot, just enough that one dark strand curved near her cheek. She did not look like my boss in that moment. She looked like the woman from years ago, if life had sharpened her instead of softening her. "Sit," she said. I remained standing. "I'd rather not." A shadow of understanding crossed her face. "Fair enough." The silence stretched. Then she set the blazer down carefully on the chair opposite her desk and faced me fully. "What I said yesterday was inappropriate." I almost laughed from sheer disbelief. Of all the possible openings, that one felt cruel in its understatement. "That's one word for it." She accepted the blow without flinching. "It won't happen again." A cold feeling spread through me. Is that supposed to make me feel better? "It's supposed to protect you." There it was. The old pattern. The one that had ruined me the first time. I took a step forward before I could stop myself. "You keep saying that like you're the only one who gets to decide what protection looks like." Her eyes darkened. "In this context, I do." "No. In this context, you have authority. That isn't the same thing as moral clarity." Something in her face changed. Not anger. Recognition. Like she had forgotten somehow that I was no longer 17 and worshipful and willing to accept pain if it came packaged as care. "You think I'm repeating myself," she said. "I think you're very good at wanting things and calling them sacrifices." That landed with brutal accuracy. For the first time, she looked stricken. Actually stricken. "You're right," she said. I had not expected that. It knocked all the air out of my anger for one disorienting second. She took advantage of that silence only to tell the truth. "I am good at that," she said quietly. "I was good at it then, too." I stared at her. The city lights behind her flickered across the glass. "Then explain it," I said. "Because I'm tired of piecing you together from fragments and restraint and things you say right before you leave." Jiwon held my gaze for a long, terrible moment. Then she crossed the office to her desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a cream envelope. My entire body went cold when she placed it on the desk between us. I knew that paper. Even before I touched it, I knew. It was old, slightly worn at the corners, folded carefully. My handwriting was on the front. To Jiwon. The confession letter. The one I had given her in high school. The one I had assumed she threw away the same day. I looked up at her slowly. Her face was unreadable, but only just. "You kept it," I whispered. Yes. The simplicity of it nearly broke me. "Why?" Her throat moved. "Because throwing it away would have felt like lying." I laughed once, shaking.
"You rejected me. I know. You let me walk away, thinking it meant almost nothing to you. I know. Then why keep this?" Jiwon's eyes did something I had never seen them do in the office. They gave up. Not composure, not discipline, only the attempt to hide. Because it was the first time anyone ever loved me in a way that made the rest of my life feel false. The room vanished. Not literally. I still knew where I was, still knew how far away the desk was, how many lights reflected in the glass, how my fingers were trembling against the edge of the envelope. But emotionally, physically, spiritually, the world reoriented around that sentence, and everything inside me went unstable. "You don't get to say that now," I whispered. Pain flickered through her face. "I know. You don't get to tell me that after 4 years." "I know." "Then stop saying 'I know' like it fixes anything." At that, her composure finally gave way, not with anger, with honesty. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, voice low and raw. "That I was 20 and scared and engaged to a future I didn't want. That my parents had already planned half my life and I mistook obedience for inevitability? That when you handed me that letter, I spent the whole night crying in my car because I had never wanted anything the way I wanted to say yes to you." I froze. The office turned soundless. She seemed to realize what she had confessed only after it was already in the air between us. Too late. Always too late. "Engaged?" I said. Jiwon closed her eyes. The answer was yes before she spoke it. "Unofficially," she said. "Family arrangement, not announced yet. Very real to them. Very suffocating to me." The floor under me felt suddenly less certain. "You were engaged when I confessed to you?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me?" "No." I laughed because the alternative was screaming. "Unbelievable!" "I know." "Stop saying that!"
This time, my voice cracked loud enough to echo. She flinched. I hated that I noticed. I hated more that some part of me hated that she looked hurt. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" I asked. "Do you have any idea what it's like to build your whole understanding of love around someone saying no, like they're being noble?" Her face had gone pale. "Yes." "No, you don't." "Yes," she said again, and there was no defense in it now, only something devastatingly sincere. Because I built mine around doing it. That silenced me. She came around the desk slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I ended it 2 weeks later," she said. "With them. With my family's plans. With the version of me that thought fear was a good enough reason to betray myself." My breath caught. "Then why didn't you come after me?" There. The ugliest question. The truest one. Her face changed with it. The answer cost her. I could see that before she spoke. Because by the time I was brave enough, you had learned to look at me like I had already made my choice. And I thought... She swallowed. I thought coming back would be selfish. Like asking you to reopen something I had no right to touch. I stared at her, furious and aching and suddenly 17 in all the worst ways. "So you just disappeared?" "Yes." "And now what? You expect one confession to fix this?" "No." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I expect nothing from you." I believed her. That was the worst part. Because beneath all the damage, all the cowardice, all the power and timing and impossible complication, I believed her. She had not called me here to win. She had called me here because she was finally incapable of pretending silence was cleaner than truth. The envelope still sat between us. My old handwriting. My younger heart. Her 4 years of keeping what she had refused. I should have left. Instead, I asked the one question I had spent years trying not to ask, even inside my own head. Did you ever stop thinking about me? Jiwon looked at me like the world had narrowed to exactly one answer. No. No hesitation, no pretty phrasing, no shield, just no. My pulse thundered. I looked away first because if I didn't, I was going to do something catastrophic. Like step closer, like forgive her, like kiss my boss in an executive office and ruin both our lives in one elegant motion. You should go, she said softly. I laughed shakily. There it is. Pain crossed her face. Ari. No, really. There it is. The part where you say the thing that breaks me and then hand me the door like that makes you merciful. She went still. Then, quietly, if I ask you to stay, I won't be asking as your director. The room tilted. My mouth went dry. Then who? Her eyes held mine. Every restraint between us felt suddenly flammable, as the woman who has been in love with you since you were 17 and too brave for either of us. I forgot how to breathe. Forgot the office, the job, the city, the years. There was only the desk between us and the unbearable truth of her face. She had loved me. She had loved me and still let me go. I should have hated her more for that. Instead, I stepped closer. Just once. Enough to ruin the distance. Her entire body reacted to it. Tiny, involuntary, devastating. I could see how hard she was fighting not to reach for me. "You're my boss," I whispered. "I know. This is impossible." "I know." I swallowed. My heart hurt. My anger hurt. Wanting her hurt worst of all. "I still think about that day," I said. "The tree behind the music building. The letter. Your face. I still think about how small I felt after." Jiwon's voice turned ragged around the edges. "I know what I did. Then why do I still want you?" That broke her. Not outwardly, but I saw it. The exact instant her control splintered. She took one step toward me, then stopped with visible force. Her hand lifted, only halfway, only to the level of my wrist, then hovered in the air between us, asking, not taking. My entire body went hot. Slowly, with a kind of helplessness I would later resent, I turned my hand over beneath hers. She touched me like it hurt. Just fingertips at first, barely there. Then fully, carefully, as if my wrist were something sacred and breakable. The contact sent a shock so clean through me, my knees almost lost cooperation. Her eyes never left my face. "Ari," she whispered. I had spent 4 years imagining what it would be like if she ever said my name like that again. Reality was worse, richer, more dangerous, less survivable. She slid her thumb, once, over the inside of my wrist, where my pulse was losing its mind. I made a tiny sound I would deny under oath. Jiwon's breath shuddered. Then she dropped my hand like she had touched fire. She stepped back so abruptly, her hip struck the edge of the desk. "Go," she said. This time, the words sounded like pain. I left. If I hadn't, I would have kissed her. And if I had kissed her, I did not trust either of us to stop. For 2 days after that, Jiwon avoided being alone with me. Meetings included extra people. Feedback came through Sun-hee. When our paths crossed in the corridor, her nod was brief enough to count as survival rather than acknowledgement. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like my nerves were being skinned one layer at a time. Jisoo, naturally, noticed immediately. "You look haunted," she announced on Saturday morning as I stood in the kitchen over coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes earlier. "I'm fine." "You say that the way people in disaster movies say there's probably no structural damage while the building is actively on fire." I handed her my mug so I wouldn't throw it. "She kept my letter." Jisoo froze. "What?" "My confession letter, from high school. She still has it." Jisoo set the mug down very carefully. "That is either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or a psychologically advanced crime. That's not helping." "Did she explain?" "Yes. No, sort of. She told me about the family arrangement. Said she loved me then. Loves me now." I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. "And none of that actually fixes anything, which is maybe why it's making me insane." Jisoo leaned against the counter, unusually quiet. "Do you believe her?" she asked at last. I hated how fast the answer came. "Yes." "That's rough." "Deeply." She sighed. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Work. Pretend I'm not one hand touch away from bad decisions." Terrible plan. Probably the only one available. I laughed weakly.
Then my phone buzzed. A work group message. Sunhee. Emergency pre-brief, Monday 7:30. Vela issue. Everyone in. Jisoo peered at the screen. And there goes your weekend piece. As it turned out, there had been an internal leak. Not catastrophic, but serious enough. A draft asset from the unreleased Vela concept had shown up in a private beauty forum. The client was furious. Halcyon's executives were furious. Monday turned into crisis management before breakfast. By noon, the office was vibrating with contained panic. And Jiwon? Jiwon was a blade. Calm, surgical, untouchable. She coordinated legal, client response, internal audits, and messaging strategy without raising her voice once. Watching her in crisis was like watching architecture survive an earthquake, which made what happened at 3:40 p.m. even more destabilizing. We were in the war room reviewing access logs when one of the external consultants, a smug freelance brand analyst with perfect teeth and a habit of calling everyone kiddo, leaned over my shoulder to point at the screen. "Sweetheart, you're filtering the wrong directory." I stiffened instantly. Before I could respond, Jiwon spoke from across the table. "She isn't." The room quieted. The consultant chuckled. "I was just being condescending while incorrect," Jiwon said. "An efficient combination, if not a useful one." Min-suk choked on his water. The consultant went red.
Director Kang, I didn't mean, then choose better language next time. So Ari is one of the strongest analysts in this room. You will address her accordingly. The silence afterward could have been framed. I stared at Jiwon. She never looked at me. Not once. Just returned to the screen and continued. "The leak likely originated from the interim review chain, not internal strategy. Keep tracing third-party access." The meeting resumed. I barely heard a word, because under the table, beneath the documents and laptops and acceptable professional distance, my entire body had gone liquid with the knowledge of what she had done. She had defended me. Not subtly, not privately, openly, sharply, without hesitation. And if that should have reassured me, it didn't. Because now everyone in the room knew two things. One, Kang Ji-won did not usually use that tone unless something mattered. Two, apparently, I mattered. After the meeting, Sunhee cornered me by the pantry. "What," she said, with deadly calm, "is going on with you and Director Kang?" I nearly dropped my tea. "Nothing." Sunhee gave me a look that should have been illegal without a license. "I was born at night, not last night. She's just invested in the account. And I'm just casually interested in whether the moon pays rent." I looked away. Sunhee's expression softened by a fraction. "I'm not asking because I want gossip. I'm asking because perception matters here, especially for women, especially for juniors." That landed exactly where it needed to. "I know," I said quietly. She held my gaze. "Then be careful. Even if she is, too. Even if she is, too." I carried that sentence around all day like a warning label I couldn't peel off. The next escalation arrived on a Thursday night. Naturally. Disaster, I was learning, prefers late hours and bad emotional timing. Most of the team had left after an exhausting round of revision reviews,
I stayed behind to finish a competitor comparison matrix because my brain was already fried enough that going home seemed abstract. At 9:08, the fire alarm went off. Not loudly, at first, just one ugly electronic chirp. Then another. Within 30 seconds, the whole floor was strobing red. I grabbed my phone and badge, swore at the half-finished spreadsheet, and joined the stream of annoyed employees heading toward the emergency stairwell. Halfway down the stairs, the power flickered. People cursed. Someone laughed nervously. A woman on the floor above us asked if this was a drill, and 3 people answered no at once. By the time we reached the lobby, rain was hammering the pavement outside in silver sheets. Great. Just perfect. Clusters of employees gathered under the narrow awning, all of us underdressed for a spring storm, clutching phones and trying not to look irritated enough to be unprofessional. I had left my umbrella upstairs. Of course I had. I was standing near a concrete planter, hugging my own elbows against the wind, when a dark coat settled over my shoulders. I turned so fast I nearly slipped. Ji-won stood behind me, already damp at the edges from the rain. "You'll freeze," she said. The coat smelled like her. Clean wool, expensive perfume, something warm underneath that belonged only to skin. My pulse went berserk. "You need this too," I said, trying and failing to hand it back. Her fingers closed over my wrist before I could move. Not tight, just enough to stop me. The contact lasted less than a second. It was still almost my undoing. "Keep it on," she said quietly. Around us, dozens of employees milled under the awning. No one was paying attention. That somehow made it more dangerous, not less. Rain blurred the city into silver light and tail lamps. The storm wind tugged a loose strand of hair against Ji-won's cheek. She looked less like my boss in that moment than like every version of the woman I had ever wanted at once. I pulled the coat tighter around myself. "Thank you." She nodded once. Should have left. Didn't. Stayed standing there in the rain-dark glow, close enough that the heat of her body made the cold bearable. Then Hae-jin came stumbling under the awning with Min-suk and immediately froze. Her eyes dropped to the coat around my shoulders, then lifted to Ji-won's face. Her expression changed from confusion to dawning horror to feral interest in under 3 seconds. "Oh my God," she mouthed. I wanted the pavement to open beneath me. Ji-won, maddeningly, looked perfectly composed. "Has anyone heard whether it's a false alarm?" she asked Hae-jin, as if she had not just wrapped me in a private crisis. Hae-jin blinked. Facilities says someone triggered a sensor in the archive room. We'll probably be back up in 20 minutes. Good. Min-suk looked between us once, and visibly decided he valued his life too much to ask questions. Smart man. When we were finally cleared back inside, I tried to return the coat in the elevator bay. Ji-won took it only after her knuckles brushed mine. Deliberate? Maybe not. Devastating? Absolutely. That night, Jisoo opened our apartment door, took one look at my face, and said, "What fresh hell?" She put her coat on me in the rain. Jisoo shut the door again, opened it, shut it, opened it once more, as if re-entering the conversation might change the sentence. "Your boss?" "Yes." "The emotionally constipated one?" "Very much so." Jisoo put down her bag. "I need a stronger form of tea for this."
Office rumor traveled exactly as fast as I feared, and in exactly the ways women always pay for first. Not publicly, not directly, just enough to be poisonous. Conversations that quieted when I approached. A glance too long from an HR coordinator I'd never met. Someone in an adjacent department asking Hye-jin whether Director Kang always looked that intense during junior presentations. Nothing concrete. Everything dangerous. My Monday, I was sick with it.
Not because I was ashamed of wanting Ju-on, because I knew what people did with stories like this. They made the younger woman a climber or a victim, sometimes both. They made the older one predatory or compromised. They stripped the truth clean off the bones and left only whatever version gave them the best angle. At 11:06 a.m., Sunhee messaged me. "Come to my office, now." I went. She closed the door behind me and leaned against her desk, arms folded. "Tell me before this becomes a crisis I can't shield you from." My stomach dropped. "There's nothing happening," I said. Sunhee inhaled through her nose. "That answer is not enough anymore." I stared at the carpet. She waited. Finally, I said, "We knew each other before this job." Sunhee's expression sharpened. "How before?" "High school." The word tasted surreal. "She mentored at an arts program I was in. I had feelings. I confessed. She said no. We lost contact. Then I got hired here." Sunhee was silent for a long moment. Then, "And now?" I looked up. "Now she is trying very hard not to make a terrible decision." Sunhee closed her eyes briefly. "Wonderful. Terrific. Exactly the sentence I wanted before lunch." Despite everything, I nearly smiled. She pointed at me. "Do not find me funny right now." "Sorry." "Has anything happened physically?" I hesitated. Her gaze sharpened. "Ari." "No," I said quickly. Then, because I could not lie to this woman and still respect myself, added, "Not really." Sunhee stared at me. "That is not a category recognized by policy." "Nothing actionable." She began pacing once behind her desk, then turned back. "Listen to me very carefully. I'm not your mother, your priest, or your executioner. I am, however, the woman whose name will appear on 3 reports if this implodes. So understand that when I say this, I'm saying it for both your careers. Until reporting lines change, this cannot become real. Not in ways anyone can prove. Not in ways that can be interpreted. Not in ways that force HR to define what you haven't yet admitted." I swallowed hard. "I know." Sunhee's voice softened. "Do you? Because your face says you're in deeper than your judgment." My eyes stung unexpectedly. I hated that. Hated almost crying in front of my team lead because a woman with impossible timing had once again rearranged my life around a sentence. Sunhee saw it, of course. She always saw too much. Her posture changed. Less manager, more person. "Do you want my private opinion? Off the record?" I nodded. She sighed. "I think she's crazy about you. And I think that makes her more dangerous to herself than to you. But institutions don't care about feelings. They care about optics and liability. So unless she plans to burn down the org chart, she needs to stay over there, and you need to stay over here." She pointed to opposite sides of the room. "Understand?" I laughed weakly through the pressure in my chest. Painfully. "Good.
Now go pretend to be calm and competent. It's what your generation is always doing anyway. I left her office with my heartbeat in my throat. An hour later, Jiwon appeared at my desk. Not in passing, not with a pretext someone else could use. She stood there while the entire cluster noticed and tried not to look like they noticed. Ms. Yoon, a moment. My whole body went cold. I followed her to a small, unused meeting room near the archives. The second the door shut, she turned to face me. Sun-hee spoke to you. Not a question. Yes. Jiwon looked almost amused for one dry second. She also spoke to me. At length. That startled a laugh out of me before I could stop it. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was correct. The laughter died. Of course. Of course she would turn reality into a blade and hand it to both of us. I folded my arms. Then what are we doing here? Her gaze moved over my face with too much intensity and nowhere near enough permission.
Setting terms. That sounds romantic in a very bad way. A tiny exhale through her nose. Almost not a laugh. You still do that. Do what? Say something impossible and make me want to smile at the worst possible moment. My breath caught. Jiwon saw it happen, regretted the sentence immediately. I could read both truths at once. She steadied herself. I'm requesting formal distance, effective immediately. No unscheduled meetings, all feedback through Sun-hee unless absolutely necessary. If staffing allows, I'll remove myself from your performance review chain by next quarter. I knew she was doing the right thing. I hated her for it anyway. You're acting like I asked for this, I said. Her expression tightened. No, I'm acting like wanting you has become visible enough to threaten you. That stripped all the breath from me. For a moment, all I could do was stare. Then I asked because, apparently, self-preservation had entirely left the building. And if it weren't? Jiwon went very still. The room shrank around us. If what weren't? A threat. She looked at me like I had just laid my own pulse on the table between us. When she spoke, her voice was rough enough to make my skin burn. Then I would ask you whether you have any idea what it costs me to let you walk out of rooms first. I should have left. Instead, I took one step toward her, just one. Enough that the line between us became a problem instead of a principle. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. Everything in me lit up. Then the hallway outside erupted with footsteps and voices, breaking the moment cleanly in half. We both moved back at once, like guilty people in a play too obvious to survive. Jiwon turned first. Go, she said. I laughed once, shaking. Again? Her hand clenched at her side. Please. That word did what commands never could. I went. The actual breaking point came 3 weeks later at the company gala. Because, of course, there was a gala. Brand agencies love two things above all else: aesthetic suffering and events with open bars. Attendance was technically optional, which in corporate language meant required if you cared about advancement. So I borrowed a dark green dress from Jisoo, let her spend 40 minutes making me look more expensive than my salary, and arrived at the hotel ballroom already exhausted. Halcyon employees in formal wear looked like a different species from their workday selves. Hyejin wore black satin and eyeliner sharp enough to injure.
Sun-hee had a structured cream suit and the expression of a woman resigned to networking as a form of spiritual punishment. Min-suk looked stunned by his own reflection. And Ji-won, I made the mistake of looking at Ji-won too early. She was in a floor-length black dress with an asymmetrical neckline and a severe silver cuff at one wrist. Her hair was down for once, sleek and dark over one shoulder. She stood beside the executive table, speaking to the COO with that same infuriating poise, one hand around a champagne flute, face lit by chandelier light and strategic indifference. She was breathtaking. She knew it. Worse, she knew I knew it. Because the moment I saw her, she looked up, across a ballroom full of people, and stilled. Not visibly to anyone else. Never visibly to anyone else. But enough for me. Enough to send heat flooding through my body so fast I nearly forgot how to walk. Jisoo had come as my +1 precisely because she did not trust me around elegance and unresolved longing. At my side, she muttered, "Oh, that's criminal. Please stop narrating. I can't. This is better than television." This is.